My name is Harold. I'm 64 years old, retired after 40 years turning wrenches in a Phoenix repair shop. I used to come home with grease under my nails and the kind of exhaustion you only earn from honest labor. My wife Marlene would hand me a glass of iced tea and remind me that sweat meant we could keep the lights on and food on the table. She's been gone 7 years now. Cancer doesn't care how many engines you've fixed. I raised one boy, Ethan. Built him a swing set with my own 2 hands in the backyard. Same hands that put every stud and nail into this house. When Marlene passed, I thought Ethan and his wife Lydia would keep this place alive with their laughter, maybe raise my granddaughter here. Instead, it's been different. Lydia has a way of wrinkling her nose when I come in from the garage, like the smell of motor oil offends her air-freshened world. Ethan laughs along, though not kindly. I'd planned a quiet retirement, fishing on weekends, tinkering with my old Chevy pickup, keeping the garden neat. But lately I've felt more like a guest in my own home. Meals cooked without enough for me. Conversations that stop when I walk into the room. Lydia once said in front of her friends, "Harold belongs in the garage, not the living room." They laughed, and Ethan didn't correct her. Last Thursday evening, I came back from a Veterans Hall meeting, holding a folded program from a buddy's memorial service. The night air was cool, the street quiet. But as I reached the porch, my heart dropped. My recliner, toolbox, and the cedar chest Marlene left me were stacked by the front steps like yard sale leftovers. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The living room smelled of wine and fresh paint. Ethan stood by the fireplace, arms crossed. Lydia perched on the couch, scrolling her phone. They looked up as if I'd walked into someone else's house. "Dad," Ethan said flatly, "we need to talk." Ethan didn't invite me to sit. He just stared, jaw tight, as if he'd been rehearsing this moment. Lydia set her phone down with a dramatic sigh. "You've had your time here, Dad," Ethan began. His voice was cold, measured. "But things are different now. This is our home. Lydia and I need space to live our lives without distractions." "Distractions," I repeated. My throat felt dry. "This is my house. I built it before you were born." Lydia leaned forward, her smile sharp. "And now you're old, Harold. You shuffle around in your grease-stained jackets, making us look like we're running a halfway house. My friends come here and wonder why we let you stay. It's humiliating." I blinked. Humiliating? After everything Ethan cut me off, louder this time. "You've done enough. You're retired, broke, and stuck in the past. We're the future. Lydia and I are going to make something of this place. You just get in the way." His words hit harder than any punch I'd taken in a bar fight back in my 20s. I'd expected irritation, maybe a lecture about bills, but not this. "You can't just throw me out," I managed. "The deed's in my name." Ethan smirked, glancing at Lydia as if sharing an inside joke. "Don't worry about paperwork. We've got it handled. Point is, Dad, you should start packing. The sooner you're gone, the cleaner the break." I felt the room closing in. Furniture I'd bought, walls I'd painted, the mantel where Marlene's picture still sat. They wanted me erased, like I was just a tenant overstaying my lease. Lydia stood, brushing invisible lint from her blouse. "We'll give you a week. Be grateful. Most people wouldn't be so generous." I swallowed my anger, my hands shaking. There was nothing generous in her tone, only triumph. Ethan opened the door to the night air. "This is just the beginning, Dad. Better get used to it." Sunday dinner used to mean roast chicken and Marlene's biscuits, everyone crowding around the table. Now it was Lydia's quinoa salad, and awkward silence. I sat across from Ethan, the weight of his earlier words still burning a hole in my chest. Halfway through the meal, I set my fork down. "You said this is your house now. On what grounds? The deed's still in my name. I've got the tax bills in my file cabinet to prove it." Ethan stabbed at his food without looking up. "Dad, stop embarrassing yourself. Things change. Paperwork changes." Lydia smirked, pouring herself more wine. "Maybe you forgot. Maybe you signed something and didn't read the fine print. It happens with older folks." My jaw tightened. "I don't forget my own signature." She slid a folder across the table. Inside was a crisp copy of a document I'd never seen before. A quitclaim deed, dated 2 months earlier, bearing what looked like my name. For a second, my heart froze. The strokes mimicked mine but felt wrong, too careful. The H looped like no pen of mine had ever looped. "This is fake," I said quietly. Ethan finally looked up, his eyes hard. "It's legal. Bank accepted it. That's all that matters." I shook my head. "No. You forged this." Silence crackled. Lydia leaned back, lips curling. "Can you prove that, Harold? Or will people just think the old man can't remember what he signed?" The implication stung. Forgetfulness, senility. They wanted me painted as a confused relic, unfit to defend myself. I pushed the folder back across the table. "You think you're clever, but lies don't stay buried. You'll slip up." Ethan chuckled, low and mocking. "Careful, Dad. Don't make threats you can't back up. You're not in charge anymore." My hands clenched under the table. I didn't have proof yet, but I had certainty, and certainty was the first step toward a fight. The following Saturday, I was tightening a hinge on the shed door when Mrs. Alvarez, my neighbor of 20 years, shuffled across the lawn with her little terrier. She hesitated like she didn't want to speak, but her eyes told me she had to. "Harold," she said softly, "I thought you should know. At the barbecue last weekend. You're Ethan. He called you an old useless man." Loud enough for everyone to hear. The wrench slipped from my hand, clattering to the dirt. "He said that?" She nodded, cheeks flushed with embarrassment. Some folks laughed. Others just looked down at their plates. "I'm sorry. I couldn't stand to keep it from you." I thanked her, but inside I felt hollow. My own son, belittling me like a punchline, and in front of neighbors who used to come to me for help fixing their cars, their fences, even their lawnmowers. That night I tried the front door. The key turned, but the bolt wouldn't budge. They'd changed the lock. My house, and I couldn't even cross the threshold. Through the window I saw silhouettes at the dinner table. Ethan pouring wine, Lydia laughing, Laura clapping her hands at some story. My granddaughter's giggles cut sharp against the glass. I turned back to the shed, heart heavier than my toolbox. Later, headlights swept across the gravel drive. A beat-up Ford pulled up, and out climbed George, my old war buddy, hair silver but back still straight. He clapped my shoulder hard enough to rattle my bones. "Word travels, Harold," he said. "I heard what your boy's been saying." I sighed. "Guess everyone has." George looked me dead in the eye. "Listen. You fought harder battles overseas than this. Don't let them turn you into a ghost on your own land." I swallowed hard. They've got paperwork. They've got my granddaughter under their roof. "And you've got the truth," George shot back. "Truth always finds a way through. You just need to be ready to swing when it does." His words lit a spark under the ashes. For the first time in weeks, I felt something other than shame. Still, as I unrolled a sleeping bag on the shed floor that night, the weight of being locked out pressed down. My home glowed warm on the other side of the wall, but I was shivering in the dark. Nights in the shed grew colder as October settled in. The thin cot creaked under me, and I pulled Marlene's old quilt tight around my shoulders. It still held a faint trace of lavender, her favorite scent. I stared at the ceiling rafters, listening to crickets outside, and thought about how far I'd fallen. Once this property had been my kingdom. Every nail in the frame, every shingle on the roof, every patch of soil in the garden. I'd touched them all. Now I was an exile in my own backyard, huddled among rusted tools and oil cans. The sound of laughter carried across the yard from the dining room windows. Lydia's shrill giggle, Ethan's booming voice, Laura's sweet laugh, innocent of the cruelty around her. My chest tightened. My son had made me the punchline in a house I built for him to grow up safe. I found myself talking to Marlene's picture propped on the workbench. I tried, honey. I worked every hour God gave me to put food on the table, and now he looks at me like I'm just trash on the curb. My throat cracked on the word. Dinner scraps sometimes made their way to the shed. Cold chicken skin in foil, half a slice of pie Laura must have snuck out. I ate alone with the smell of motor oil, washing it down with tap water from the hose. Pride tasted bitter, but hunger tasted worse. One evening, I dragged the cedar chest outside for air. It was heavy, carved by my father, meant to pass to Ethan someday. Now it sat on the porch like abandoned junk. I ran my fingers over the lid and whispered, "They've already buried me, Marlene." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing Lydia's voice in my head. Old, useless man. Over and over, until it wasn't an insult, but a verdict. And then, rummaging through a pile of unopened mail Lydia had tossed in the shed, I found it, a crumpled envelope from the bank. Inside, a loan application bearing my name, my address, and a signature I'd never written. My pulse hammered. The loops, the angles, stiff, clumsy copies of my hand. My son wasn't just mocking me. He was erasing me. The morning after I found that forged loan paper, I barely touched my coffee. My hands shook as I studied the stiff loops of the fake signature. Ethan thought he'd buried me under paperwork and whispers. George stopped by mid-morning, carrying a stack of dusty ledgers. He slapped them onto my workbench hard enough to rattle the sockets. "Remember these?" I blinked. They were my old repair shop books, yellowed pages filled with invoices, signatures, receipts. George had kept them after helping me close down the shop years back. "Look here," he said, flipping pages. "Every real signature you ever made. Tax filings, supplier checks, even the damn permit applications. This is your handwriting in ink, year after year." I leaned closer. The difference screamed at me. My natural, fast strokes versus the jerky imitation on that bank form. No expert needed to see it. George crossed his arms. "With this, you've got a foundation. They can laugh at insults, but they can't laugh at hard evidence." For the first time in weeks, I felt my spine straighten. The weight of shame slid back, replaced with something sharper. I set the forged paper beside my old ledgers. They wanted me to fade. Instead, I'll drag their lies into the light. George grinned, teeth flashing beneath his gray mustache. "That's the Harold I know, not some ghost in a shed." I nodded slowly, the decision hardening in my chest. "Tomorrow, I'm calling Campbell." "Campbell?" "My old union lawyer. Sharp as nails, doesn't scare easy." George slapped the bench. "Good. You'll need someone who can swing the hammer where it hurts." That night, For the first time in weeks, I didn't eat alone in silence. George brought over stew, and we ate together in the shed, planning. Every bite carried a strange new flavor. Resolve. When I lay down, I whispered to Marlene's picture. They thought they could throw me away, but tomorrow, I start fighting back. Monday morning, I sat across from Campbell in his cramped office downtown. He was in his 70s now, hair white as chalk, but his eyes still cut sharp behind steel-rimmed glasses. He thumbed through the forged loan document and my old ledgers, lips tightening with each page. "This isn't just sloppy," he said finally. "It's criminal. Forgery, fraud, attempted theft of real property. If we catch them in the act, it's open and shut." I leaned forward. "What do I need to do?" He tapped the desk. "Two things. One, more hard evidence, at least 2 pieces that can stand in court. 2, witnesses. Someone besides you who can vouch for what's happening." George shifted in his chair beside me. "I'll vouch. I've seen enough already." "Good," Campbell said. "But we need more than character testimony. We need their own words." That night I returned to the shed with a new tool. A tiny recorder Campbell had loaned me. The kind you slip in your pocket and forget. The chance came quicker than I expected. Tuesday evening, Ethan stomped into the shed, angry I'd refused to hand over my truck keys. Lydia trailed behind, her voice sharp. "You're being selfish," she spat. "If you just let go, we could finally cash out this place and live like normal people." Ethan jabbed a finger at me. "All you have to do is disappear, Dad. Once you're gone, the land, the loan, it's all ours." The recorder hummed silently in my pocket, catching every word. My hands shook, but I kept my voice steady. "Someday Laura will hear how you talk to me." Lydia scoffed. "By then we'll have everything. She'll thank us for putting you out of your misery." When they stormed back to the house, I pulled out the recorder. The blinking red light felt like a lifeline. Proof. Their own arrogance captured in digital sound. Later, I played the file for George. He gripped my shoulder. "That's your bullet, Harold. Now we just need the second one." Campbell called the next morning. His tone was urgent. "Your son is at the bank again. Word is, he's pushing that loan through within days." My pulse quickened. Then that's where we aim next. Campbell met me outside First Valley Bank on Wednesday afternoon. He wore his best suit despite the desert heat, briefcase in hand. "Stay calm," he said. "We're just requesting public copies. Banks keep records of every loan application. If your name's on it, you have a right to see it." Inside, the air was cool, the lobby quiet. A clerk with nervous eyes fetched the file Campbell requested. My stomach twisted as she laid a manila folder on the counter. Inside sat a neat stack of forms bearing my name, my address, and my forged signature scrawled across every page. Campbell lifted one sheet, tilting it to the light. "Ink patterns inconsistent. Someone traced this with hesitation. Compare it to your driver's license signature." He set them side by side, and even the clerk gasped. "This is your first bullet," Campbell whispered. "Documentary fraud, plain as day." We paid for certified copies and walked out with the folder sealed tight. The Arizona sun felt less oppressive than it had in weeks. For the first time, I wasn't just the victim. I was holding ammunition. That evening, George brought over his old camcorder. "Thought you'd want to see this," he said, setting it on my bench. "Caught Ethan last night when they were hauling your recliner to the curb." The grainy footage rolled. Ethan and Lydia dragging my chair across the lawn, laughing. Ethan raised a beer can and shouted, "Good riddance! Finally free of the old man!" Neighbors' voices chuckled faintly in the background. My jaw clenched. They hadn't just mocked me in whispers. They'd performed my erasure like a spectacle. George folded his arms. Between the bank papers and this tape, we've got their intent and their method. That's more than most prosecutors get handed. I nodded slowly, clutching the camcorder. Proof #1 was in the folder. Proof of forgery. Proof #1. 5, if you asked me, was right here on video, my son celebrating my disappearance. Back in the shed, I laid both items on the workbench beside Marlene's photo. You see this, honey? They wanted me gone, but now I've got their lies in my hands. Campbell called again that night. His voice was sharp. Harold, get ready. We're moving toward an injunction, but I want more, something undeniable. Watch their next step. They'll slip. They always do. I glanced at the camcorder, then at the loan papers. Ethan thought he was untouchable. He had no idea the walls were already closing in. Saturday evening, I waited until the neighborhood was alive with barbecues and kids on bikes. Ethan and Lydia were in the driveway unloading groceries, music blaring from their car. I walked across the lawn with George and Campbell at my side. "Ethan," I called, loud enough for the cul-de-sac to hear. He turned, eyes narrowing. "What do you want now, Dad?" I held up the small recorder. "Just for you to hear yourself." Before he could protest, I pressed play. His own voice spilled into the evening air. "All you have to do is disappear, Dad. Once you're gone, the land, the loan, it's all ours." Gasps floated from the neighbors clustered nearby. Lydia's face went pale. Then her voice echoed out of the device. "By then we'll have everything. She'll thank us for putting you out of your misery." The chatter around us died. Even the music seemed to dim. Laura, clutching a doll by the porch, stared wide-eyed at her parents. "You recorded us?" Ethan snapped, face red. "I preserved the truth," I said evenly, "so folks can see who you really are." Mrs. Alvarez crossed the street, shaking her head. "Ethan, how could you talk to your father that way?" George folded his arms. "Looks like the old man's not so senile after all." Ethan barked a laugh, brittle and loud. "None of this matters. Nobody's going to believe a bitter old mechanic with a tape recorder. This house is already ours. The bank's in on it. The papers are signed." Campbell stepped forward, his voice calm but cutting. "Not quite. We've already secured certified copies of your fraudulent loan documents. Every shaky letter of your forged signature will hang you in court." Ethan's smirk faltered for just a heartbeat, then returned sharper. "You think paperwork scares me? I've got friends at the recorder's office. Lydia and I have taken care of everything." The crowd murmured. Lydia grabbed Ethan's arm, whispering urgently, but he shook her off. I slipped the recorder back into my pocket, meeting my son's eyes. "You can lie to yourself, Ethan. You can lie to her. But you can't lie to everyone forever. The cracks are showing." He stepped closer, face inches from mine. "You're finished, old man. Enjoy your shed while you still can." But his voice wavered, just enough for me to hear the fear beneath the fury. And I knew he was starting to feel the ground shift. 2 days after the confrontation in the driveway, I sat in the shed, thumbing through the forged loan papers again, when my phone buzzed. The number was blocked. "Mr. Hall?" a low voice asked. "Yes. This is, let's just say, someone at First Valley Bank who doesn't like dirty deals. Your son's been pushing hard to finalize that loan. He's scheduled to draw funds within 48 hours. My stomach dropped. "How much?" "200,000, secured by your property. Once the money's transferred, good luck untangling it. Thought you should know." The line went dead before I could thank him. I sat frozen, the shed suddenly too small, too hot. Ethan wasn't waiting for court battles. He was cashing out fast. I called Campbell. He listened without interrupting, then said, "This accelerates everything. If the funds hit his account, it muddies the waters. We need something airtight, immediately admissible." That evening, George arrived with his laptop and a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "I might have just what we need." He clicked through folders until grainy footage filled the screen. Security camera archives from the county recorder's office. "Don't ask how I got this," George muttered. "Let's just say old friends still owe me favors." On the screen, Ethan sat stiffly at a desk, pen scratching across a deed form. His wrist moved awkwardly, tracing instead of writing. My own name butchered stroke by stroke. Then, clearer than daylight, he slid a thick envelope across the table. The clerk glanced around before tucking it into a drawer. I gripped the edge of the workbench. "That's it. That's the nail." George rewound, zooming in on Ethan's hand. He thought nobody would notice. But cameras don't lie. Campbell joined us an hour later. He watched the clip 3 times, then closed the laptop with finality. "Mr. Hall, with this and the loan documents, we have him dead to rights. Forgery, fraud, bribery. Tomorrow morning I'll file for an emergency injunction and deliver a copy to the prosecutor's office." I exhaled for what felt like the first time in months. Ethan thought he was sealing my fate, but he'd signed his own prison papers instead. Still, fear gnawed at me. 48 hours. If we didn't move fast enough, he could still siphon the money, maybe disappear with it. George clapped my shoulder. "We've got him, Harold. Now it's just a matter of timing." I looked out toward the dark outline of my house, where lights glowed in windows I could no longer enter. For the first time, I felt not just hope, but certainty. Ethan's countdown had begun. Tuesday morning, I sat across from Campbell in his office, the air thick with dust and old leather. The laptop glowed between us, paused on the frame of Ethan sliding that envelope across the recorder's desk. Campbell leaned forward, elbows on the blotter. "Mr. Hall," he said, voice steady, "this is decisive. With the forged loan documents, the recording of their words, and now this video, we have 3 pillars: fraud, forgery, bribery. Any judge worth his robe will shut them down." George paced the room, fists clenched. "So when do we hit them?" Campbell clicked a pen. "Immediately. I'm filing for an emergency injunction this afternoon. It'll freeze the loan disbursement before Ethan touches a cent. At the same time, I'll move to void the fraudulent deed. Once a judge sees this footage, the case won't just be civil, it's criminal." Hearing it laid out so plainly made my chest tighten. For weeks, I'd been sleeping in a shed, eating scraps, humiliated in front of neighbors. Now the ground was shifting under Ethan's feet. Campbell continued, "The prosecutor will salivate over this. Video evidence from a government office? It's a gift. And the clerk who took that envelope? He'll flip fast once charges are on the table." George barked a laugh. "Your boy thought he was slick, Harold, but he left fingerprints all over his own noose." I stared at the frozen frame of Ethan's hand hovering above my name. I remembered teaching that same hand to grip a wrench, to throw a baseball. Now it was the hand that tried to erase me. "What happens next?" I asked quietly. Campbell leaned back. "Tomorrow morning we'll be in front of a judge. I'll request the injunction, present the loan papers, and this video. Once the freeze is ordered, Ethan can't touch a dime. After that, the prosecutor will pick up the case. By week's end, your property will be safe, and your son will be staring down indictments." George slapped my back. Told you, brother. We let him talk long enough, he'd hang himself. And here we are. That night I stood by the shed door, looking across the lawn at the house lit up like nothing was wrong. Ethan laughed at something on the television, Lydia bustling in the kitchen. They were still celebrating their victory, blind to the storm rolling straight toward them. For the first time in months, I felt taller, steadier. They had thrown me out like trash. But tomorrow in court, the truth would do the talking. The courthouse smelled faintly of floor polish and stale coffee. Campbell walked steady at my side, his briefcase heavy with the evidence that had kept me awake at night. George followed, jaw set like he was heading back into battle. Inside the courtroom, Ethan sat at the defense table, Lydia at his elbow. He looked sharp in a navy suit, hair slicked back, but his eyes kept darting toward me. Lydia's hands twisted in her lap, knuckles white. The judge entered, gavel cracking. We are here to determine the validity of a deed transfer and related loan documents regarding the property of Mr. Harold Hall. Campbell stood, voice crisp. Your Honor, the evidence will show clear and deliberate fraud. First, he placed the certified loan papers on the screen. My name scrawled in stiff, jerky strokes beside Ethan's neat signature. He compared them to decades of my real signatures. Even from the gallery, the difference was obvious. The judge frowned. These signatures are not consistent. Campbell moved on. Second, an audio recording. My son's voice filled the courtroom. All you have to do is disappear, Dad. Once you're gone, the land, the loan, it's all ours. A hush fell over the room. Lydia's recorded words followed, just as sharp. She'll thank us for putting you out of your misery. Lydia buried her face in her hands. Ethan sat frozen, jaw clenched. Then Campbell opened the laptop. And finally, Exhibit C. The video played. Ethan in the recorder's office, tracing my name with shaky precision, then sliding the fat envelope across the desk. The clerk's nervous glance said the rest. The judge leaned forward, eyes like steel. Mr. Hall, is that your son in the video? I swallowed. Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Patterson, the judge barked, do you deny this? Ethan's lawyer stammered. Ethan rose halfway from his chair. Dad doesn't deserve that land. He wasted his life on it. I was building something better. The gavel slammed. Order! The judge's voice cut through the noise. The court finds the deed transfer fraudulent, the loan application void. And this matter referred to the county prosecutor for charges of fraud, forgery, and bribery. Effective immediately, the property remains in Mr. Harold Hall's sole name. Bailiff, take Mr. Patterson into custody. Gasps rippled through the room as the bailiff stepped forward. Ethan struggled, shouting, You ruined me, old man. You'll regret this. Lydia reached for him, but the bailiff blocked her. Her face collapsed into tears. Laura's small voice echoed from the gallery. She'd come with Mrs. Alvarez. Daddy, why did you lie to Grandpa? Ethan's shoulders sagged. He stopped fighting as the cuffs closed around his wrists. I stood tall, the weight of months lifting from my back. You tried to throw me away like trash, I said softly. But fathers don't disappear that easy. The gavel struck one last time. Ethan was led out in chains, Lydia sobbing in his wake. And just like that, the house I'd built with Marlene's hands and mine was mine again. The next morning, I unlocked my front door with the key they had tried to make worthless. The house smelled of dust and lemon polish, just as Marlene used to keep it. I walked through each room slowly, touching the walls, the mantel, the cedar chest. Every corner whispered of years that were mine alone, not theirs to erase. George came by with 2 coffees. He set one in my hand and grinned. Told you truth would win. I nodded. They threw me out like garbage, but I wasn't done yet. That evening, I sat in the garage, fixing the carburetor on my old Chevy. For the first time in months, the silence felt like peace, not exile. I looked up at Marlene's photo on the shelf and said, "No one gets to take away who we are, or what we've built." They tried to bury me. Instead, I stood taller. If you've listened this far, thank you. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done in my place? And don't forget to subscribe to Revenge Stories Men U60 USA, because stories like mine deserve to be heard.